Good afternoon and welcome to the October 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. My name is Steve Brandt and I'm the president of the board. Before we begin the meeting, I would like to ask the clerk to read the reminder to speakers regarding treating our captioners with kindness.
Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments.
Thank you. We'll now ask the clerk to call the roll to ascertain the presence of a quorum.
Member Fry is absent. Abene.
Present.
Payne.
Present.
Chugtai is absent. Vice President Priestinson.
Present.
President Brandt.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum with us today. I will now offer an acknowledgement that we meet today on land of the Dakota and Ojibwe. And we will now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismin.gov. Board members, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second. All right, we have a second. Proper motion is before us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, next is the acceptance of minutes from the September 17th, 2025 meeting. May I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Second. All right, we have a proper motion before us. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The ayes have it. The minutes are accepted as presented. We will now proceed to item 4 on the agenda, which is the acceptance of public comment. And wanted to check with the clerk whether we have anybody signed up to testify today on an item before us on the agenda, and it appears we do not. Just want to remind the public that any item that's on the board's agenda for that day is fair game for public comment. If you'd like to come down to the meeting and sign up, or send us an email. So we'll continue with the next item on the agenda, which is one we've been waiting for some time with great anticipation, speaking for myself at least. It's the Alternative Revenues Investigation presentation. For this item, we have Andrew Hawkins, the Director of the Legislative Research and Oversight Office of the Council or Clerk, to give the presentation. Proceed, please, Mr. Hawkins. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, President Brandt, Vice President Priestinson, and members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. This is actually my first opportunity to meet and share our work with you all, so I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having me. Today we're going to cover, again, a review and analysis of city revenues, national landscapes, and challenges and opportunities. So this is very similar to the presentation that was given and shared with the Budget Committee on Monday. However, just based on some of the feedback from that meeting and some of the notes that I had made in advance of that presentation, this one contains a little bit of that has been folded in. So while it might look a little, substantively different, it's going to generally be covering the same scope of materials. We just wanted to edit for content and clarity. So to start off with a legislative background, again, from legislative research and oversight, it's important to us that everybody always has a clear understanding of, what brought us here today. Obviously, with the City Council staff direction that we received at the end of 2024, that was what we were in response to on Monday. However, what brings us here today is the Board of Estimate and Taxation, just verbal conversations going back to, I believe, the meeting on September 18th, 2024, where There was a discussion about the need to explore alternative revenues and identify if there were essentially any levers that the city wasn't exploring to bring in some additional revenue streams and reduce the reliance on property tax alone. So to give you a little context for how these materials are being delivered, and just to help level set and make sure that we know what the timeline looks like going forward. What you're receiving right now, both this presentation and the preliminary report from Guidehouse are part of what we're calling Phase 1. These materials were broken up into 2 different phases in order to allow legislative research and oversight to deliver certain pieces at an earlier date. With the idea being that A, more is always better, but B, that would allow both the City Council and the Board of Estimate and Taxation to identify any potential focus priorities that they wanted to see expanded in a final report that's right now we're aiming to deliver in November. So with that said, the primary focus of this presentation is going to be an overview of the city tax and revenue landscape, including our property tax trends and allocations, looking at the city's current sources of revenue, understanding how departments receive funding through different revenue sources, and then just talking through the challenges and limitations that the city is currently facing with regard to revenue, generation of revenue and how revenue is collected. Additionally, there's an analysis of the comparable cities to identify any similarities, differences, and opportunities. This can include an overview of the challenges when comparing city revenue structures, looking at how geographic cities are used to standardize the data so that there is some degree of comparability over time, highlighting potential programs or initiatives that the city could consider that are currently in operation by some of these comparable cities, looking at the challenges and barriers to specific options, which, I double up myself there, but again, just challenges and barriers to specific options, and then recognizing that in November, Guidehouse and LRO are going to be producing a final report. Speaking to that final report, that's what we're going to be calling Phase 2, or we are calling Phase 2. And so this is just kind of an idea for where we're at right now based on conversations. What that will contain is an expanded analysis of priority options that are identified either through the meeting Monday, through just conversations with elected officials, or the meeting today. What we want to do with those options that are identified is to be able to do a little deeper dive on additional data and the feasibility, the potential impact, whether it's positive, adverse impact, equitable impact, and then to the extent we're able to kind of modeling what the implementation structure and timeline for those various items might look like should the city want to continue that exploration any further. Additionally, just being able to do those high-level outcomes or high-level estimates for what the actual monetary impact would be for the city from the prioritized options, and then being able to provide a categorized breakdown. Just some examples for what that can look like is going to be a breakdown based on essentially the ease of feasibility. So we can do low-hanging fruit first, all the way down to what's going to require us to go to the state and request changes at the from the legislature. We can also look at it by sources of revenue in terms of if this is going to be something that would come in from a tax, from a fee, from some other kind of revenue stream. And then there's also the option to be able to categorize by revenue generation. So do we want to start with whatever our biggest revenue generator would be, or do we want to start small and go from there? So again, we're going to have plenty of options, and we want to be able to break those out. All right, getting into the property tax landscape. Well, the focus of this presentation is almost explicitly on what other options do we have outside of property tax. I felt it was important to at least cover this in some capacity because it's sort of, it's obviously the subject that's brought us here. But I think understanding, what this looks like and how this is distributed is still a valuable item of information to cover. So what Minneapolis is experiencing right now with its property tax, again, I think the general increase that we're seeing, obviously the chart on the right, that's pulled from the budget division's 2026 CSL level that was presented on June 11th, 2025 to this body. As you can see, projections have that increasing to over 50% and then continuing to increase over time. As I mentioned, that's the trend that we're certainly not alone. This is something that we're seeing nationwide that regardless of the state, location or geography. A lot of cities are very reliant on property taxes as one of their primary sources of revenue, and so these types of increases are being felt across the country, especially just recognizing our current landscape. As funding is being limited or cut off at the federal level, cities are becoming even more reliant on revenue streams that they have more control over. So again, another issue from these, from property tax and just the continued increase is that cities need to account for the adverse impact. Essentially, like how high can things go, and how much revenue is available to be collected before you're going to have some kind of tipping point. So whether that's property taxes become high enough that individuals who have the mobility to do so will look to begin looking at housing elsewhere. It creates financial issues. And so that's that kind of cascading effect is something that needs to be, I think, at least in the minds of everybody as we're looking at, like what this trend is doing going into the future. But yeah, like I said, absent additional revenue sources, we're looking at property taxes being the bulk of, at least 50% or more of the city's overall revenue. So again, while it's not unique, it's still something that is, a growing concern and needs to be addressed to the extent we're able. All right, looking at the 2025 property tax levy burden. So again, I'm sure, well, you all are very, very familiar with this. I don't know, like how much members of the public understand what the breakdown of property taxes look like. A lot of times when they get the bill and it shows them their Minneapolis specific property tax, the assumption is, well, that's just the amount going to the city. However, again, as you know, you're positioned to know more than most. It is broken up. 80% of it goes to the city or city responsible items. 1776, it goes to the Minneapolis Park Board. Just under 1% is with the Public Housing Authority, and 0.2 actually goes to the Board of Investment and Taxation, so to yourselves. But the reason it's important to know this is because not only are there multiple entities that are able to levy a property tax against the residents or individuals visiting the city of Minneapolis, but even the Minneapolis-specific part of that property tax is being divided up across a number of agencies. So it's a very, I think there's often a complexity to this that's not necessarily recognized. All right, now we're going to move into City of Minneapolis non-property tax revenue. We'll start off with the City of Minneapolis intergovernmental revenues. So I believe the complimentary report from Guidehouse identifies this as well, but Minneapolis is extremely reliant on intergovernmental revenues. This can include federal, state, and local. I note the federal one because, as discussed previously, right now those funds are probably some of the most volatile. In the event that we see decreases to those funds, it's unlikely that we're going to see complementary increases to the other funds because there is definitely a trickle-down effect where, a lot of times the state can act as a pass-through for funds that it receives. And so again, as limitations begin to happen at that highest level, everybody's going to need to be filling their gaps. Moving into the state, we get a fairly high volume from the state of Minnesota. Local government aid is our largest. That's $71 million in 2025. And the municipal state aid, $6 million, local affordable housing, $8 million. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but just to give people an example for some of the buckets that are being pulled from. And then local government grants, like we do have grants and aid that we, I think, actually go back and forth with Hennepin County. But just for example, we have $10 million in county grants from Hennepin. Moving into, again, additional sources of revenue outside of money that's coming in from the state and property taxes. This is one of the few areas where we do actually have something that we're able to leverage. So special use taxes in the city of Minneapolis. The first one I'm going to highlight is Minneapolis entertainment tax. It's a 3% tax citywide. The 2025 budget projection for that in the budget book is $26.9 million. This covers things like admission fees, lodging, sales during events. Again, I've found the categories interesting. Whether or not everybody else does is going to be subjective. But this is, again, sporting events, concerts, theater performances, movie theaters, pub games. So somehow darts and billiards are taxed. I'm not sure how we're collecting that money. Then categories that are exempted or not covered would be transportation fees. So, Uber or Lyft, that like TNC companies that individuals take to 2 games is obviously not going to be covered by that. And then athletic, health, and golf clubs, both the fees and the I believe membership fees are exempted / not covered by this tax. Next, we get into Minneapolis lodging taxes. This is another 3% citywide. $8.6 million in the 2025 budget was a projection. It is just a flat 3% on room rental expenses. But then also at the state level, the city is limited to 6.5%. So we cannot exceed the taxing rate on lodging of above 6.5. The reason that's noted is for the next slide. The map you see to the right is the Minneapolis downtown taxing area. So I just abbreviated it as DTA. So the DTA, it's an additional 3% tax that applies on specific restaurant and liquor taxes within the geographical area that's been circled in red. In 2025, the budget projection for the restaurant-specific tax was $10 million or $10.5 million, and the liquor tax was $4.5. It's a 3% tax on food and beverage sales. Again, at restaurants, 3% on liquor. It includes all of the stadiums that are downtown, so Target Center, Target Field, Convention Center, and U.S. Bank Stadium. However, as you will see on the right side, and I covered this on Monday as well, I believe it's a result of when this map was drawn, the city of Minneapolis has continued to evolve and change. And so one of the areas that consists of a very high congregation, I guess, or like high clustering of entertainment entities that would be the direct subject of this tax exists outside of the boundaries. And that's the North Loop. And so one of the issues that can potentially create outside of even just a reduction in the taxable base is that it can create some inequities as far as how businesses are able to operate outside of this identified area. I believe in recent years we've even had additional like theaters or music venues that have opened up that are outside of this that are able to operate absent that 3% tax. That obviously all of the venues that we have on Hennepin, First Ave, are all going to fall under this. So again, there's a little bit of a disparity there based on just what's happened since this boundary was drawn. License and fee revenue. So this is one of our biggest buckets. And again, I think part of the reason that it's one of our biggest buckets is it's one of our only other options. So this is going to be something that we see across almost all cities. Again, the amount they're bringing in as a percentage of their budget is going to vary. But this is some very traditional, city delivery of services. So we've got sewer, water, waste, utilities. For sales, it's again asphalt mixes, materials. Then looking at licensing and permits, city's got over 600 licenses, I believe, and counting, for a range of things from your non-business licensing and permits, which building, planning, plumbing, to business licenses, which would be rental housing, liquor, beer, food, businesses, and amusement. And then lastly, we have special assessments at $34 million, which again, special assessments are going to be replacement of water lines when they do any kind of improvement that brings an increase to the property value, generally falls under the category of special assessment. All right, getting into the fee schedules. So as you can see on the right, it's a proposed 2026 license fee revisions. Every year, the city goes through our license fees and to kind of determine whether or not anything needs to be revisited, increased, reduced, based on a comparison of, again, applicable examples. So this will go through, again, a myriad of buckets, but we have services and sales, which, animal care and control, inspections, towing, utilities. We've got licensing and permitting, which would be plan examination, pollution controls, so the PCAR-related fees that we have here in the city, rental housing licensing. And then the one that I think, again, most people are generally familiar with is our parking lots. So parking lots, meters, parking ramps, and the fees that we set for those, both at a daily, monthly, and event rate. For this one, I know this was a specific part of the ask from council. I don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but the ask was essentially to identify what city departments or programs were funded weren't in part funded by programs, fees, and additional revenue sources. And so again, the easiest way to do that was going to the budget book and actually just showing the departments that are on the general fund only. As you can see, it's only a handful that aren't receiving some kind of additional or aren't relying on some kind of additional government fund source, proprietary fund. The one caveat I will note on this is that all things are not created equally. Even though you might see a department that's spread across 3 different funds, it doesn't mean that they're all pulling at the same rate. Due to factors like program-specific funds that are generated by some of the city's departments, there are certain departments and programs that certainly are pulling at much higher volumes from this. I know I spoke with the city clerk about this when I was surprised that it was one of the ones that was on here, and I believe one of the additional funds it receives is for the printing office in the basement of City Hall. So that's like $10,000 or so. But obviously, you have much bigger programs in operation that are going to be reflected the same way in this chart. From there, we move into the national landscape. If the following, again, like 3 columns, three city comparison looks confusing, that's by design. That was sort of my intent. Again, I promise I'll explain it now so that it all makes sense. But the idea behind this is just to show how challenging it is to compare cities across other cities, as far as where their revenue streams are, what funds they're most reliant on, because the structure of these cities is so fundamentally different across the country. You have different regulations and guidelines at the state level. You have cities that are counties. You have cities that have different authorities and different departments than we do in Minneapolis. And so again, like trying to get just a clear picture of where we stack up against other cities is extremely hard unless you're able to standardize that data in some way, shape, or form. I mean, again, just looking at this one, there's some categories where they do sort of align as far as what they call it, what we call it, but amounts are going to vary wildly. So we've got our lodging tax at 8.6 million. Kansas City's got their hotel tax at 36 million. So, with that one, it jumps out. Like, obviously, there's more at play there than just looking at it as an apples-to-apples thing. So sometimes there are examples you can pull out from this that are worth additional exploration. But again, with Kansas City, the biggest outliers you'll see is the 1% city earnings tax. That's $373 million. You won't see anything similar reflected on our side. Moving over to Boston, again, similarly, you're going to see some stuff, net state aid, they're reliant on that just like we are. Room occupancy, which I think is the same as our lodging tax, it's, $139 million. Motor vehicle tax, that's essentially a pass-through tax from the state in lieu of a property tax, but that's where it's $25 per every $1,000 of valuation on a vehicle that's owned and kept in the city of Boston, is just under $60 million. Additionally, Logan International Airport is within the Boston city limits, so they receive aircraft fuel tax of $40 million, which is, again, something that we're not privy to. And then lastly, I'll note the pilot payments, so that's payment in lieu of taxes. I'll get into more about what that program looks like later, but Boston realized just about a decade ago that, or maybe they didn't realize it, but they realized they needed to do something about it, that 50% of the taxable property in Boston was tax exempt, either because it was operated by a nonprofit or government entity. And so the pilot program is essentially a way to collect some revenue from those entities that are not are exempt from taxes but are still using city services. To give a little explanation to the national landscape comparison, again, this one is a little complicated to do. I tried to add some context to it because I know that you do have 2 reports. You have one from us and one from Guidehouse. Well, I want them to be able to speak firsthand about their work when they come back, and I think when we deliver the report in November. I still want to cover it since obviously that's a big part of kind of what we're looking at going forward. So. Guidehouse reviewed, they have a list of 10 comparable cities. It actually includes Minneapolis, so it's 9, to look at similarities, differences, where are their opportunities, what do the revenue sources look like. This required the data to be standardized due to the complexities that I mentioned on the previous slide. The best way to kind of conceptualize what this looks like, in case people hadn't figured it out already, is it's looking at geographic cities. So what this looks like when it looks at Minneapolis is going to be the geography of It's like the geographic city of Minneapolis, not explicitly the city of Minneapolis. Just like when they look at New York, it's it's the geographic city of New York, Seattle. The reason for doing this is what I explained previously. Just there's so many different pieces that in some states it'll be the city, in some states it'll be the county, and in other examples it'll be the Met Council is responsible for transit, whereas Kansas City has a transit tax because it's some of it falls under the authority of the city. And so the idea with this is that it allows you to actually measure cities better, at least against each other. I think the other real value that this adds is that none of this happens in a vacuum. Obviously, this board, city council, the city of Minneapolis as a whole, only has the authority to impact, the revenue collection and any increases to the levy and, like on its end. The ability to see whether or not an area is, like as a whole is overly reliant on any one source of revenue is something that you have to consider, because what we do, can be impacted by what Hennepin County does. And so I think this actually does give us a better understanding for where those other moving pieces are, where they might have access to revenue that we don't. And just because again, all of those are different entities that have their own scope of control. Generally, just the way that revenues and taxes are going to work, the pool that they're pulling from is the same. It's going to be the residents of Minneapolis. It's going to be individuals that are coming downtown for shows and theater and concerts. And so like that, I don't know that group's going to differentiate where the source is coming from as much as we all might differentiate what our own scope of authority is. All right. Just to start by summarizing some of the findings in Guidehouse's preliminary report. Minneapolis is relatively more dependent on intergovernmental revenue as a share of its total revenue, but it generates less revenue per capita than most of its peers, indicating an opportunity to expand and diversify, like own and single source revenue, as in revenue the city is in more control of. Minneapolis can increase revenue generation by implementing new strategies inspired from these peer cities and or by adjusting our existing sources. So looking at our programs that might be mirrored elsewhere and seeing if there's efficiencies that we can potentially implement on our end. Leading examples of revenue generation strategies that were found include variations of land transfer tax, income tax, business tax, congestion pricing, excise tax, payment in lieu of taxes and service fees. And then lastly, Minneapolis is, I'm going to editorialize, extremely dependent on property tax revenue, indicating an opportunity to diversify its tax portfolio within the confines of the state, or within the limits of the state law. Yeah.
First bullet point there.
Yep.
When you say that Minneapolis generates less revenue per capita than most of its peers,
Yep.
Is that for total revenue or for intergovernmental revenue?
That one's for the city's revenue generation from taxes, and I believe from taxes and services and fees. I think I actually will talk, I think I can speak to it in the next slide.
Great, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so highlight examples of how Minneapolis is positioned across comparable cities. So I think this first one is probably going to start to get into that. So of the 10 cities reviewed, Minneapolis ranked 9th in per capita revenue. The potential explanations for this, so what you'll see in the italics is what was pulled from Guidehouses, and then based on my conversations with them and own research on the topics, are going to be the potential explanations below, since obviously like all of these are going to have their own, lead to their own subsequent questions, so I wanted to give as much context as I could here. So again, it's the ranking of 9th shouldn't be received or reflected as bad. It's not. This isn't a contest to be to be in the top. I don't think. But again, it just stands to reason that there'll be a question with it. So potential explanations are the number of available tax categories is one. The reason that we're not generating as much revenue as comparable cities is again, I said potential, but this one's probably more of a concrete, where we just have access to fewer revenue streams than other cities do. If property tax is your only tool, we don't have an income tax, we don't have land transfer tax, so it's going to generate less revenue. Again, average property values and income are also going to play a role. If you have an income tax, if your average income's higher or lower, obviously that's going to impact what's coming in. Similarly, property tax. If you have a really, you could have, if you have extremely high property value, you can have a much lower percentage tax, and you're going to bring in more revenue per capita. So there's a lot that can complicate, what that actually is telling us. But again, it at least indicates that, by comparison and like breaking it all the way down to per capita, like clearly there's not as many avenues that we have to pursue. Going to the next one, Minneapolis ranked 10th in per capita revenue generated from taxes alone. Potential explanation, I can just double down on what I said before. Minneapolis has extremely limited tax categories and sources. Like what some of these other municipalities have at their disposal is going to be far greater than the city of Minneapolis. So unless we want to increase our property taxes to, I don't know, triple, like we're not going to start to approach what some of these cities do because we're on a single, we're relying on that single source of taxes. So it just stands to reason that I almost view the ranked 10th as, it's tough to compete with some of these cities with what we have. So we're definitely playing here with an arm behind our back. Minneapolis has relatively higher property tax rates. Compared to peer cities, we're 3rd out of 10 and faces limitations with how much it can increase these rates. In case I'm starting to sound like a broken record, this is because that's what we have. Property taxes are one of our few tools in the toolbox. So again, if your only tool is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. For additional context as well, just to kind of show that there is some complexity to this, like based on property values, this is where the cities with a lower rate may still have a higher property tax bill. So just going on rate alone isn't going to tell you the whole story. Seattle's rate of, I think ours is 1.25. Seattle's is 0.77. It produced $6,898 as a tax bill on a median priced home, and that compares with Minneapolis's 1.25, producing $4,445. So again, just looking solely at what the level of the rate is does not tell you the full story. And then lastly, Minneapolis was 4th out of 10 in per capita revenue from charges for public services, which provides one of the city's other largest sources of revenue. Potential explanation, reduced tax options are going to increase reliance on service and fee revenues since as one of the only other revenue generating streams the city has access to or control over. Next, just looking at the revenue report, wanted to pull out some of the example revenue categories that were identified by Guidehouse and just quickly touch on a couple examples of what those look like. The first being taxes. Again, excise tax, income tax, business, land transfer, pilot, empty homes. There's definitely a range of these that exist across just, again, only 9 other cities that we looked at, so there's no shortage of options out there. And then just to kind of go into some examples of these, Kansas City has its 1% earnings tax that I believe applies to all residents of Kansas City and anybody that is employed and operates within the city of Kansas City. And that generated $613 per capita. Philadelphia, realty transfer tax of 3.578. That applies to the sale of any properties in the municipality of Philadelphia. $169 per capita, and then Denver's 10% facilities emission tax was $32 per capita. I note that one simply because we have something similar with our entertainment tax, and so just showing that again, like there are percentage taxes on emissions in other cities that are operating at a much higher rate than the city of Minneapolis. Next, we have charges. So examples would be asset monetization, congestion charge, which I think everybody saw in New York recently, service fees. An example of a very simple example of this, Denver recently increased its parking meter fees from $1 to $2 per hour, which brought in $11 per capita in additional funds for the city/county. And then miscellaneous revenue, this would be special service districts and betterment levies. This is where we, again, see Boston's payment in lieu of taxes. So that revenue was $94 per capita. Essentially the way that this was developed over a number of years in partnership with the organizations that were tax exempt. And so the way that Boston, at a very high level, the way that this was implemented was to identify the potential tax liability that would have been due had these institutions or businesses not been exempt. And then they have a formula to determine the public benefit. Obviously, we get a lot of, there's a great benefit to the existence and operations of hospitals, schools, and things of that nature. So they didn't want to implement anything that seemed too punitive or that seemed like it was missing out on, the fact that the reason they're exempt is because it was a recognition that they're providing these societal values. So with that calculation, they're able to take their public kind of service or like public contribution, deduct that from the tax calculation, and that leaves them with their pilot payment. The way that this is like operates, it's not a tax because it's voluntary. So they do maintain a public-facing dashboard that shows all of the institutions and agencies, programs, and groups that are covered by this, and what their assessed pilot fee was for that year, what percentage of payment has been completed, and what percentage of payment is outstanding. I believe right now it covers everything from the university, all the schools, colleges, universities in Boston, obviously at the higher education institutions. And then it also covers hospitals, and then there are a couple other ones, I believe the Boston Philharmonic and some other groups like that. And then the last example under miscellaneous, this is Portland just did its parks, or has a parks local option levy. This was 80 cents per $1,000 of assessed value on a property. So the revenue from that was $82 per capita, and that was intended to provide for specific park improvements in the city of Portland. All right, and lastly, the challenges and opportunities. I need to get a little more inflection in my voice because I don't want this to all feel as negative as it probably did, but one of our biggest challenges is state law and regulation. Right now, anything that even begins to look like a tax becomes a big issue at the state level, and so the city it's something that I think needs to continue to be discussed and considered, as you've seen from these other examples. The concerns around increasing property tax are something that are more of a shared nationwide concern. The extreme limitations on revenue sources for municipalities, it's not a direct correlation with the volume of cities that would say that that's their main concern. Property tax is always going to be a concern, even if you have more revenue sources, because it's the one that your residents are obviously going to feel. And so just looking at how the state regulates, again, whether it's cannabis revenue, and there's a lot of conversation that seems to be very valid in this area. Capacity and structure. That's noted. I mean, we can view it as an optimistic way, where again, it's what is our capacity and structure to take on new sources of revenue. Obviously, again, for pilot in Boston, they have to have an entity that's responsible for overseeing the program, for collecting the revenue. And so if it's something that we don't have, that's an important calculation of figuring out, what's our opportunity cost of pursuing some of these just from a organizational standpoint. Again, if it's going to cost us $200,000 to stand up, a group who would be responsible for collecting a tax that brings in $150,000, then it might not be worth pursuing. And then lastly, we have that adverse impact. As I talked about in previous slide, there's tipping points on all of this, and so whether it's property tax, whether it's service fees, it be that towing. Our fines and fee schedules, like how those are going to hit people, in their own realities are going to be very different across our own city. There's a range of income levels, different backgrounds, and everyone has their own unique personal circumstances. And so again, especially with fines and fees, since that's generally a flat schedule, what the impact of those fines and fees looks like to the individual is going to be significantly different than the complexity of the fine and fee schedule itself. So just noting that that's something that needs to be considered. That this is not an unlimited. We can't just turn up the water, turn up the spigot and have more money come out without there being some other potential impact that we need to account for. So just there's always something under the surface that's worth a quick, at a minimum, a quick look. Moving into the opportunities. Again, silver lining, like there are some options. I want to be clear that that are not subject to the restrictions on taxes. Service charges and fees, like I just mentioned. Again, we have a lot more control over those. It's just something that we need to be very deliberate about how we consider those and what the measurable impact is going to be to the community. And then in addition, the pilot style programs, because of the voluntary nature of them, I think they operate outside of, they seem very much like a tax. The voluntary nature and the fact that you just don't have to pay them if you don't want to is what's allowed a number of places. to start pursuing like those types of programs. I think additionally the fact that they don't need to be framed up as this punitive program that exists. They are done in partnership with these institutions as a way of, again, I think ultimately, especially in times where other revenue sources are shutting off, as a way to help contribute to the community, and just that acknowledgement that they are receiving services, emergency services, and the infrastructure that the city provides to them. So I think it does have to be viewed more and pursued in the event that it is pursued as a partnership. Leveraging ongoing research, providing additional data and context to Minneapolis-Pacific landscape. I say that not as a method of self-promotion, understanding that I'm here providing some research right now, but just to say that the more that this is looked at and the more that we know, I think the stronger our arguments become about why we want to look at certain areas. As long as I've been around Minneapolis, again, like some of the limitations with the state laws and everything they've been a well-known issue that we faced. However, the extent of the impact, or what options are we foregoing? I think the more that we know and can build that out and actually come to the table showing what would be possible in the event that we were allowed to pursue different avenues like some of these other cities. Will it be the change that gets some of this across the finish line? I don't know, but it never hurts to come in with all the information that you can possibly have. So. And then similarly, the increasing focus on this issue, both from the federal level, but just even outside of that, the property taxes and municipal funding issues, there is a growing concern across the entire country about cities having to cut and tighten some of these, either due to severe restrictions at the state level or just decreasing revenues, property values, whatever it might be. But that increased focus does mean that it's driving both the urgency of this issue, but also the innovation. So again, much like we are standing here today, other cities are absolutely beginning to look at what other options they might have, what other revenues might be they might be able to leverage, and how they can bring in additional resources to the city without again just continuing to increase the resources that they have available today. And lastly, next steps. The first, identify potential high priority revenue options for additional review in the final report. I put out the same ask to council. If there's any of these kind of options that jumped out to anybody, feel free to let me know, and we can add those to essentially the deeper dive that the Guidehouse is going to conduct. We're also going to be providing some additional supportive research that will be part of that final report. Next, consider the city's legislative priorities and potential revisions needed to pursue any revenue options. Even without having a final report, it's pretty clear that there are some, some consistent themes here. And so, to the extent that the city wants to look at what its legislative priorities are and shuffle those around based on, any of these revenue needs is something that needs to be considered. And then lastly, monitor-related work that could impact city revenue. So there is an ongoing fee study that's currently being conducted by the administration departments right now. I don't know the return date on it, but I know they have a vendor that's currently conducting the work. It was actually, the reason I was able to link to the city auditor's one, it was presented as part of the city auditor update at Monday's audit meeting, and that's the workforce optimization and comparative benchmarking study. I don't want to speak on behalf of the auditor, but that one, I believe, just at a very high level, is looking at kind of across the enterprise at the work that we're doing and how we're structuring our different departments and how that compares to, again, comparable cities. So, how many people fill potholes here versus how many fill potholes in Portland? What does our structure for that look like? What do we pay, per? I can't promise that'll be in the report, but I feel like potholes have a way of always showing up. That wasn't meant to be a joke, but you can take it as one. And then lastly, the continued rollout and implementation of state cannabis regulation and revenue collection. This is another one that's a growing point of interest across cities nationally, as we're seeing more legalization efforts that have made it through state legislatures. It was in the Kansas and Boston slide, but I think Boston was significantly lower. They were than Kansas City was. Again, the reason being that it's just how this filters down to cities. There's some states that allow the cities to keep a significant portion of the revenue based on, sometimes, it's based on sales. There's other states where they just divvy it up equally across counties. And so I know that the state itself, this has been kind of a heated point of discussion as the states kind of rolled this out, but I know that the tax is starting to be collected on a larger portion of that legalization effort. And so, I'll certainly be interested to see what comes into the city. and what that looks like comparatively to like some of these other jurisdictions, because again, just because they've implemented it doesn't mean that it's implemented in its final version, and it's not something that we can add to as a legislative priority. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm more than happy to stand for any questions.
You're not planning to present the second document?
The guidehouse is one. I wanted that to primarily stand on its own, just because I want them to be able to speak to it. I'm happy to take questions from it. I'm familiar with it, but the idea with that one was that to give everybody, again, some additional context and information. But again, I want them to be able to present in its entirety when they're because that's the one that they're going to build out on their side, and then I'll have some additional. But again, if there's any questions on it, I know it's attached to the LIMS file. I'm more than happy to speak to any of those.
All right, I just wanted to clarify there. Just for the benefit of my colleagues, I did go through the per capita figures for the various options that are used by various cities, and the minimum and the maximum, and put some dollar figures to the per capita figures that are based on Minneapolis population. Now, that's a very, very rough calculation, but I'll try and summarize that in a memo and circulate that to you and to council members. And additionally, I know that Mr. Hawkins has done some work, for example, on just for illustrative purposes on a land transfer tax just based on the number of real estate transactions we have in Minneapolis. So I will defer on that. And what questions do my colleagues have? Commissioner Benny.
Thank you. That presentation was interesting, and I read the other document that was in the packet. So we're not having a presentation on that, or that's coming at a later date, just to clarify?
Guidehouse will be expanding on that work. That one, that's why I tried to pull a little bit of it into, again, I didn't want to just give everybody that and not speak to it at all. That's why I had a couple slides where we at least kind of did the highlights of what's in that one. But the idea was to make that one available too, just so that people can see, again, a little bit more of a deep dive into some of those examples they gave. And then that'll, with the goal being that we want to identify, there's obviously a really big range. We can't necessarily, again, I would love it if we had capacity, but we can't necessarily dive into all, 40 examples they had. So it was sort of using that to prompt everybody to identify, hey, here's the 10 that we'd really like to learn more about in that next report that comes up.
Okay, so there'll be a report in November, I think I heard.
Yep,
Okay.
the final report will be delivered in November. And
Okay.
then, but again, I've worked with them on all of that, and I'm very familiar with it. So if there are any questions, I don't want to leave people.
No, that's fine. I couldn't understand
Yep.
the what's going to happen. Okay,
Yep.
so a couple more questions. One is, actually, I just heard a coworker of mine said 52% of the land in St. Paul, he lives in St. Paul, is tax exempt. Do we have a number like that for Minneapolis?
It's one I want to get. And I said the same thing to council where I'd started I had a similar question that was, well, aren't we different than Boston? So it was actually kind of coming at it from a different angle. But I had just pulled some, again, it was just public data, so I'd want to work with our assessor's office and everybody to ensure that, it was being interpreted correctly. But the amount we have is not negligible from what I've seen as far as what's exempt. And I know with St. Paul, I think they looked at a pilot type structure a number of years ago, and I can't remember the reason, but it never was picked up. But they did implement or put a tax increase or levy increase, I think, recently. And part of the reason that was given for that to justify that increase was that, similarly, they have a high volume because of the state government. Mm-hmm. State government, parks, like other government buildings, education institutions, museums. They have that same issue where they have a lot of properties that they're not able to activate from a tax standpoint. So again, in lieu of a pilot program, they ended up increasing their levy, which is an option. But I think that again, with that recognition, of the issue, it does seem like we're seeing some innovation at the municipal level. There might be more options other than just acknowledging, well, there's nothing we can do. It's going to be outside of our scope, and so let's just increase the levy.
Okay. I'm a little careful about mentioning this, but I work at the University of Minnesota, and I work on the operations side, and I know that the university makes contributions for special assessments. So if there's a paving project, so that's already something that happens. I don't know if the other institutions do that in the city. The other thing is, a couple other things caught my eye. it's just an interesting number to see. The city of Seattle, their property tax rate is 0.77%, but they can collect a higher rate per property or median price, and it's because they have a more valuable land portfolio. The other thing to know, just for awareness, I think that was the only city on the list in the other report that's in a non-income tax state. So Washington has no income tax. So that's why fees are so high on that item, because I lived out there for a while, and you get feed like crazy. And I don't think that feeing is very progressive, to tell you the truth. The other thing is, one more thing caught my eye, and that's the betterment levy regarding parks. So I would ask that you take a look, or the work takes a look, because that actually used to be the case in Minneapolis, and it was considered inequitable. And the park board's done a lot of research on the Elwell law, ELWELL. I'm seeing nodding behind you. Yeah. So it actually, I think, also stifled the development of parks in northeast Minneapolis, because the idea was that it was harder to tax a certain subset of properties for this betterment. So we've been there, we've done that. Before you spend a lot of time looking at that, I just throw that on the table, and I think that's all I had to say.
Thank you, again, Commissioner Ben. I appreciate that. And like addition, I will say, I can't remember if I noted this already, but as kind of under the umbrella of how any of the pilot program stuff, like, they always want to ensure that that's being framed as being done in partnership, not exclusive to some of the federal grants. I mean, like our universities and higher education institutions have their own issues that are stemming from the current administration as well. At the federal level. So yeah, it's like, as I said, with just the complexities of the city, that's not outside of it either, where there's so many factors that we want to be aware of before we just kind of charge into something.
Are there other questions? All right, I'll dive in then. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the work that Commissioner Payne did to get this resolution authorizing this study through. And, of course, it rises in Commissioner Chughtai's committee and will be further discussed there, I'm sure. And, of course, Councilmember Walmsley also has played a role here. And we're sort of in I would say, for lack of a better term, maybe speaking more for myself and Commissioner Priest-Ensign, in a cheerleader role here. We have no formal role. We see the problem every year when we vote on increasing property taxes and hear from people about the impact of that, but we have no formal role in the deliberations here. I would offer any help that I can provide as a BET chair, and if you need it down the road in pursuing legislation. And I would also offer staff time, if the board is agreeable, to provide any research assistance that you might find helpful as you proceed. And I would like to just ask some specific questions here. The property tax projections out into the future for Minneapolis and the increasing percentage, are those pretty much based off of the 5-year financial direction?
President Brandt, that yes, those are pulled from the presentation that the budget director had given, and when I spoke to them about this to confirm, that was my understanding.
Okay.
So that's currently the projection based on everything remaining the same.
Okay. And I'm wondering, for the various special taxes, aside from the, not including the sales tax, are the percentages, except for the 6.5 overall limit on lodging tax, are the individual percentages, the 3%, are those set by and the same thing for liquor and restaurant, are those numbers, those percentages set in legislation at the state level, or are they within the discretion of the city council?
I will ultimately defer to the city attorney for any more detailed answer, but my understanding is that for those taxes, just like everything else, it's not simply allowing us to do the tax as we see fit. It comes with a number attached. So I think those are currently locked in. The same goes for the Minneapolis downtown taxing area. So what we define as downtown is subject to, again, the discretion and a vote of the Minnesota legislature.
Okay. And that even applies to the boundaries, as I understand it, for the downtown taxing area, which seems cumbersome, let's put it that way. And I understand there's been some resistance at the state level to adjusting the boundaries, and there will be changes in retirements as the legislature's composition advances in the coming years, and maybe some of that will get a different look. But
President Brand, if
Yes,
I may,
sir.
too, because again, I said this to council already, so I'm in for a penny, right? Without editorializing too much, again, I mean, understanding what it takes to go to the legislature with some of these, I think it's, it's one thing to go and say, the 3%, we need another percent or two because we're going to do this or this. The downtown taxing area feels different to me. We're just, again, like, it's one thing to restrict a city's ability to, levy taxes against, its residents and, businesses. It's another to define what's downtown. And so the fact that the city itself can't define what it considers to be its own boundaries, I believe my statement to council, again, was budget committee. So, I said, if all 13 of you drew a map of what you consider to be downtown, I don't think anybody's map's going to be reflected by the state's downtown taxing area. So, again, to whatever degree that gives a little bit more, I don't like oomph to an argument about letting us. Please let us, get some more control back over some of this. That one seems like a logical one, because what that reflects isn't anybody, I don't think it's any Minneapolitans' understanding of what downtown Minneapolis is.
I totally agree with that point, and I would, but experience has taught us so far otherwise, but it would be nice to devolve that authority to the local level. I can see why the state would want to keep an upper limit on the percentages, but Commissioner Priest-Stinson, did you have an additional comment? Okay. All right. That, I think, pretty much exhausts what I had to ask. And are there any additional questions? Okay. Seeing no more questions, I'll ask the clerk to receive and file the presentation, and thank you for it, and we look forward to November.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, and I can actually, we'll go ahead and publicly promise that I'll make sure I keep you informed on when we're going to have that presentation that comes back. Because to the extent we're able to, I'd love to, at a minimum, give everybody the opportunity to connect with Guidehouse to speak to their work directly as well. Whether it's through just meetings, whether it's a joint meeting, whether it's this meeting, we'll figure it out.
And perhaps I should just inquire of Council President Payne, would the budget chair be the appropriate body with copies to the council to address any comments on the findings so far?
That sounds appropriate.
From an outsider like me.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. All right, number 7 is a discussion, or rather a presentation from Christina Keiderling, our senior advisor, the BE staff update, which I think we're all looking forward to. And she is in the process of making her way forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. My name is Christina Keiderling, and I'm your Senior Advisor. I'm just here to offer you a brief staff update on a few different things from administrative to research projects and let you know where we're at with a few different measures that you had tasked me with. So first, we'll cover more administrative topics. First is an onboarding process for BET elected officials. I worked directly with the board's vice president, as well as some people in the administration, including the chief operating officer and the deputy chief operating officer, as well as the city clerk, to come up with a living document that would really help and assist with onboarding for new elected officials specific to the BET. The reason for that is that there's usually quite a bit of onboarding for city council members traditionally, but the BET has been a little bit more of a monolith, and we don't have necessarily a lot of stuff in writing. So there's been a couple different efforts efforts to try and establish procedures and make it a little bit more streamlined so it's much easier for future generations of the board to first of all, have that historic knowledge from term to term and know where they're supposed to turn if they have any questions or they need a contact or things like that. So first thing is the SharePoint, which you all have access to. That is where you can find this BET elected officials guide. And if you want to provide any additional insight, if you think there's anything in there that would be helpful, or you just want to review it, I keep a most up-to-date version on that SharePoint, which again, you all have access to. I didn't include it here just because it is an internal training document. But if you want to go see it, just go to that SharePoint like we discussed before, and you can certainly take a look at it. That's probably going to change just as I meet with additional members of the city and I find out more about their onboarding and what we can do to really get future generations of BET elected officials comfortable in their roles. But it's in progress, and we've made great strides with it. So just to give you an update on that, very, very happy about that. The second thing that's been going on as far as my day-to-day is work process and departmental relationships update. I have met and fostered relationships with other city departments to better define roles and responsibilities, including bringing back tasks that at one point were with the BET staffer and then moved away when you guys were not fully staffed. So I have brought some of those back. As an example, I've set up quarterly meetings with accounting and budget where I, as the senior advisor, will be providing year-to-date BET budgetary reports for discussion. What I'm going to do with this, I am actually the person who's monitoring your budget now and seeing the expenses as they come in and flagging anything that looks unusual and making sure that your year-to-date expenses are about where they should be. But I have quarterly meetings set up with both accounting and budget at the same time so that, number one, everyone can get familiar with everyone else. Number two, we're a little bit closer to other city departments because that is what accounting does for every other city department. They just didn't, when I reached out to them, they were a little caught off guard because they didn't realize that the BET even had a staffer and they had never checked in with anyone before about the BET's budget. So I will be providing the actual reports, but accounting will be there in case something looks weird, it needs to be reallocated. They'll be able to do that actual moving of the funds for me. And then budget will be present to make sure that budget and I are in lockstep about what we think about the BET budget. Are we bringing in revenues like we expected? Are we expecting to change any of the proposed budget for BET the following year? Just to make sure that finance and I are on the same page. Additionally to that, the senior advisor will both be drafting the annual levy resolution with the levy tables provided by finance and the BET's annual levy resolution, pulling back tasks that previously went to finance. If you remember this year, getting a copy of that final resolution was, maybe a little confusing. We were waiting to see, is it coming from the clerks? Is it coming from finance? Who's it coming from? It's going to come from me in the future. And I was actually requested it was suggested by someone within the finance organization if I was willing to take it. I said absolutely, and so I will be taking that role back and providing it myself so we have a little bit more clarity moving forward. Just as a note, none of that has been contentious whatsoever. It was suggested by someone in finance that I do that, and I was more than enthusiastic to do so. So these are all very good relationships. It's not been, give me that duty back. We have a wonderful working relationship with all of these departments I've mentioned. Next, we are getting a purchase card for the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Right now, we do not have access to a purchase card. We could go through, like, the clerk's office, who has very kindly offered to, help me make some purchases and things like that, but we don't have our own purchase card. That's going to be changing. I will be taking that training as assigned so that I can be your purchase card holder. The Director of Administration within the clerk's office has kindly offered to be the approver. The approver has to be someone within the organization who's specially trained to do that, and the clerk's office once again stepped up and very kindly offered to do that so that we could pursue getting a purchase card. And then finally, the elected official security training, the in-person version happened today, so I really hope for those who attended that it was helpful and that you got something out of it. Security Services has been wonderful to work with, and we are going to send out some electronic resources so that those who weren't able to go to the in-person training today can see some other resources offered through Security Services. And if at any point any elected official has any questions or they need a refresher training, I plan to make this part of the onboarding for the next round of elected officials when they come in, just so they can get it at the start of their term as well. But if at any point you have any questions, feel free to route it through me or to go straight to Security Services. They're always there to help. If anyone has any questions on any of those topics, you just let me know. Alrighty, and then the previously proposed near and far term BET investigations. This page is going to look just like the same page I keep presenting to you because it's the same page that I was originally given as part of the work plan, and I'm just giving you updates to it as things happen. So of course, the near-term alternative sources of revenue, you just heard from Director Hawkins over in the Legislative Research and Oversight Division. That is going to be a developing project because they're coming back in November. And in case you didn't hear him mention, he said that he expects there to also be offshoots of work. And because you kindly partnered with the City Council previously to allow me to work on that, it's something I'm very much looking forward to working with LRO to decide how we're going to distribute that work. So it's something I'm very excited to be part of. If there's anything specifically this board would like investigated, I know that Director Hawkins spoke to it. Please let us know that. But I'm very excited, and I hope we can keep this informal enough that I can help with these research projects or these investigative line items as they come up without boring you with the little nitty-gritty details of we're looking at this, we're looking at that. It's more of a holistic, what is your objective here and what can I help them with? So I appreciate that partnership, and I think it'll certainly increase my workload as we move on. For FAR term, the geographic analysis and mapping of dollar flows, that is still in progress with the Minnesota Department of Revenue. It is quite the information request. I'm continuing to work with finance. As I updated you last time, I took the specialized information disclosure training required by Department of Revenue. Unfortunately, it's just a request that's going to take a bit of time. So what I would ask of the board is that when you look at those two items, see if either of them you want tweaked based on what has happened since then. Because I know when this work plan was discussed, that was several months ago, and now we've had so much happen with alternative revenues, and we have a new budget proposal. You might not be as set on those items as you were previously, so if you would like anything changed, I would just ask you to let me know that, so I know once I get this information back from the Department of Revenue, what is it that we're trying to ascertain. I think this might be able to be really well tweaked based on other investigations that are happening within the city. As Director Hawkins brought up, Audit is doing their own investigation about our capabilities. There's going to be a lot of different investigations coming through LRO, so it's going to be really good to keep abreast of those and figure out if we want to tweak what I'm working on relative to what's hot in the city at that time. Finally, and you might have some questions to this, I know there was discussion, there was a proposal that we have an analysis of major cost drivers in city budget growth, perhaps supplemented by a panel of outside experts. I worked with President Brandt pretty closely on this. President Brandt, I know you had a specific vision for what you wanted this to look like. Unfortunately, when I did meet with appointed boards and commissions, they were very receptive and very much looking to work with me. But per the guidance we got from the city attorney, the BET does not have the chartered authority to create a board, commission, work group, investigative group, anything like that. It can only come through the city council. So I think that this bullet point could change if you wanted me to investigate a different part specifically of the budget growth, but as far as creating like an outside group of citizens or individuals, that the BET really does not have the independent authority to do so. If you have any follow-up questions on that, I know our city attorney can certainly speak to it.
All right, is that the end of your presentation?
Yes, sir. I would have given you a list of proposed where we can come from here, but I know there's a lot of other things you're receiving during this meeting, which I think might give you clarity to what you want me to investigate. So I'm not going to be as presumptive, and I just stand for the board to hear what you would like to see in the future.
I have some, Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
You can proceed with asking Mr. Hamer questions if you'd like. I have some different comments on what was presented, so whichever is your pleasure of the order of speaking is fine by me.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. What I did, first of all, amazing work. You're doing exactly what we hired you to do. It is beautiful to see. Wonderful, fantastic. Thank you. What I did want to circle back to is I would suggest, we talked about the work plan before, and we were, how would I word this, a little loosey-goosey with like, we're all a thumbs up, we're good. I think we need to formally approve, both for process and accountability, what is on that work plan. We need to formalize that, and it needs to be voted on moving forward. The job description is general buckets, the work plan is specific. It says the what. How she goes about doing that work and prioritizing it is in her job scope. It's what we pay her for at the senior level, to have that independence, autonomy, and agency. But in order for her to have that, we can't be fast and loose with that work plan. We should be voting on it. I'm seeing our clerk nodding in agreement. If anybody would like further remarks, I'm sure he'd be happy to give them. But we should be very formal. At any point in time at any meeting, somebody can suggest, I think we should add something to it. We can vote on it again, formalize it, and have it there. But that is the process that I recommend, and our clerk is nodding yes to, that we should be following, instead of just kind of a thumbs up, we're good. Just to make sure that we are clear about what that work plan is, and we don't accidentally end up doing the thing that we exhaustively talked about before bringing on Ms. Keiderling and after, which is that one of us ends up directing her to do something that is not in that work plan that has been formally voted on by this body. Those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, other questions? I had questions just about a few areas where I just am hoping you can provide some clarity and maybe a couple suggestions for the board to consider when we next address what should be in the work plan, which perhaps should be at our next meeting. Where does the matter of clarifying with PERA where we stand on the pension issue, has that been resolved at this point?
No, sir, that's still, I'm sorry, ma'am, do you want to speak to it, or?
I suppose I could speak to it since it's me. It's weird to be talked about.
Yes, ma'am.
So where that stands is that we were waiting for the invoice from the state for the current year. It has started being deducted. So for the current year, that's happening. And then for the previous years, we still have not received a response yet from the state legal team. But it is my intention to put forth two, what's the right word for that we talked about? Mr. Hamer, help me out. What's the submissions that I need to put forward about what I'm asking for? It's not.
Is that a claim?
The claims. So I plan to put forth two claims, and the reason I say that is because even if the state comes back and says we can't do anything about the past 3 years, it doesn't change the fact that for 3 years I was robbed of something I should have had, and I would be requesting that money be returned to me. In addition to looking at, based on how my money was diversified, you can go back and you can actually, there's a way to calculate that from an investment standpoint on how much money was lost by that money not being vested in for that period of time. So there will be a second claim. I'm waiting for the second claim to find out from legal. The first claim I haven't submitted because I'm still waiting on that invoice, so I know exactly what it is I'm submitting a claim on. But I will also say, and it can move as fast as it's going to move. I would greatly hope that this is done and I'm not on the other end of a dais or, on the other end, coming in a different capacity after my term is done. I would greatly hope that we can have this shored up before my term is over, is my hope. Is there anything that I missed in that update, Ms. Keiderling?
No, ma'am, that's most up to date. I did reach out to all the parties involved, both at HR and the city attorney's level as recently as this week. We are still waiting for an update, so I'm sure they're getting sick of me, but we are staying on asking for updates.
Thank you.
All right, and then the next item I had was, in addition to onboarding the incoming board, I can't remember if we included in the onboarding, trying to rationalize our onboarding process to also put together a protocol for when Ms. Keiderling eventually finds a department head job at the state or something of that sort, and we need to hire somebody new. Was that part of the work plan? I have a vague recollection that it was.
I don't even want to say loosely. I think that we will recreate the process that we did before. I think that's solidified. We know that we have a full-time staffer. That's already said and done. So in the event that there was a resignation or whatever reason that we were losing our staffer, we would proceed as before, except this time we shouldn't have the length that we had because the RFQ is already done. We're not going back and recreating that wheel. We would simply be putting up a posting through HR that we are hiring and going through the hiring process, picking up from that piece without all of the beginning that dragged out for, a year and a half, just trying to get the RFQ portion. So I would say that it's included. There just wasn't a lot of work that needed to be done there because that work has already been done.
Okay, Commissioner Priest-Ensign, I was thinking not so much of the pre-hiring, but the process of bringing on the executive secretary
Yes.
that you stepped in and did yeoman work on.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is included on what that looks like. In the next portion of our agenda, we'll get into a little bit more of that, actually.
All right.
But yes, it has been accounted for.
Okay. And one other thing, could you please send me an email and maybe copy other board members just with the anticipated timing of your upcoming leave, just so we have that top of mind when we're talking about future tasks. And in your job description, there was, I believe, discussion of the executive secretary serving on the city's debt management committee, and I wondered if that has happened since I think we've sold bonds since you started with us. Have you had anybody reach out from finance on that score?
Absolutely, sir. So I get updates from Alan Hoppy on when bonds are going for sale or when we should expect presentations back from bid. As far as a committee where I physically go and sit on it, no, that hasn't happened. I can certainly reach out to finance and ask. My guess is that process might have changed to what the current process is. But if there is something I'm missing that I'm not receiving by email and there's a discussion portion of it I should be part of, I will follow up on that and let you know.
I think there was a sort of an explicit statement from finance that they would want you to be part of that, and that even preceded the adoption of a work plan, and I think that it's important to get you in on that as our representative, since we're the ones that authorize the issuance of the bonds, even though the city issues them. Another role that is potential, and we haven't talked about it in connection with the work plan, but it's something that was done previously by your predecessor as the last full-time executive secretary, was calculations on property tax impact of the proposed budget, which is currently being done by the assessor.
Assessor, yes.
And if there's I don't know her feelings. I'm sure she felt plenty busy before they took on that task, but we felt it was important to have that happen, and it did happen. But maybe we should think about whether we want that to come back into the work plan for you or for you to assist them. And that's something we can defer until we talk about the work plan, unless you have anything to contribute on that.
No, sir. I'd want to reach out to the assessor and see if there's some way that I can open up relations with them. The assessor's office is not someone who I've been able to, who I just have not reached out yet. So like the ongoing relationship I have with finance, I'd like to do the same with the assessor's office. So thank you for letting me know, and I will pursue that and let you know what I find out.
Certainly, if you could scope it out, and then we could talk about whether it should be a part of your work plan. And you noted, and I have heeded the advice of the city attorney that the BET does not have the authority under the charter to create a working group, which was what I was envisioning. And perhaps it would be time for me to have a conversation with one or two of my colleagues on the council about whether they would find that sort of analysis helpful, and we could request that they do that. and if they're willing, have you assist in that process and authorize us to do something like that. But again, that's probably a discussion for the work plan after some further discussion with my colleagues on the council. All right. Any other discussion? All right. Okay, we will ask clerk to receive and file this update, and we will move on to discussion item 7, which is the outcome of the supervision system and onboarding analysis, and Vice President Priest Stinson will lead this with input from City Clerk Casey Jo Carl.
I've got some remarks together so I could stay on point. So for clarity and context about this motion does not take away our charter authority to have a staffer. What it does do, though, is it puts in place the operational and organizational support that is necessary from onboarding through the entire lifespan of our full-time staffer. It ensures coordination between the BET, our policy group, council offices. It strengthens the support for our board. It provides greater access to resources, systems, and data that currently exist, but we really don't have access to. Importantly, it also guarantees that our current and any future staffer, as well as our elected at-large board members, receive para and/or other benefit support, to include signing up on time, which is wildly important. That would be included in that. And that coordination and support really comes from the clerk's office, which I'll get to. It's also important to note that our staffer supports this motion. I want to be very clear about that, and also make space if she would like to speak to that at any point. Her opinion absolutely does matter on this. She is the one that is managing our day-to-day operations, and she knows better than any of us what systems and supports are needed to do this work effectively in order to carry out the job that we have asked her to do on a full-time basis. Another key correction that we'll get to in discussion item number 8 is also talking about something that was missed in not having what I'm proposing in this motion today. Because there wasn't anybody steering the ship, if you will, there was never any discussion by any of us board members about what level of pay she should start at, and so it defaulted to a step 1. So that's just, I say that as just another example of something that was lost by not formalizing something, which is what I'm suggesting in this motion. And also, I want to be clear that this motion, again, in no way minimizes or jeopardizes the power of the Board of Estimate Taxation to have its staffer. In fact, it also, as a byproduct, if you will, creates a cost savings for the BET while aligning our operations with best practices across our city enterprise. As you know, we changed our government structure. We exist in the visual of what that looks like, but we didn't really take any formal steps to really include us in what that looks like operationally, which is what this motion also corrects for. There are also certain operational functions to that point that elected officials simply cannot perform, such as setting badge access levels in the system for someone to get a badge, meaning our staffer, or new BET members, or managing halogen permissions for performance reviews. This motion ensures that those essential functions are properly supported and compliant and are able to be carried out. And I do also want to take a moment to apologize to our staffer. While I did show up every day during that onboarding during her first week and did my best to correct what was missed, and thankfully was able to loop in our clerk's office, this isn't the experience that any of us wanted her to have, clearly. So we want to thank you. I'm going to say we want to thank you for your patience and grace. And I also want to express deep gratitude to our clerk's office, especially to Casey and Kelly, who immediately stepped in when I went to find them, as I usually do, to provide even the basics of just a workspace so that she could have a place to be, but also build that sense of community with her colleagues, which is necessary in this work. That is the city enterprise that I know. A collaborative enterprise, a responsive enterprise, and one that is committed. And I deeply admire and support that work within our enterprise. Finally, I want to thank our executive team led by Margaret Anderson Kelleher for working with me to find a solution that is both functional and just. We did put a lot of work and time into investigating and addressing this issue, meeting with one another, having individual meetings. And so I want to recognize everyone who showed up to be a part of that solution, to include our city attorney's office, who drafted the resolution that I'm going to put before us for discussion before we move to adopt. And I will say that by supporting this motion today, we unburden the incoming BET from carryover items like we inherited. Interestingly enough, this motion, which could have been done already, and allow for them to have a fresh, supported start from the beginning, unlike what we inherited for ourselves. With that, those are my comments about the motion that we'll get to. With permission, Mr. President, if Mr. Carl has additional remarks here, so just some specifics here, with your approval, I would like to pass the mic over to Mr. Carl. Mr. Carl.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Casey Carl. Most of you know that I have the privilege of serving as the clerk for the City of Minneapolis, but I also have the pleasure, pursuant to this body's bylaws, of serving as clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. So there is a formal relationship that has existed and that continues to exist between the clerk's office and the Board of Estimate and Taxation, which I believe and would like to claim has been a productive one that has been to the benefit of this body over the years. It's in that same spirit of collaboration, as you said, Vice President Priest-Stinson, that we are bringing forward a proposal that would place the BET Senior Advisor within the Office of the Clerk for administrative and operational support purposes. As was very well detailed, it would assure an operational center of support, both for this body, the BET, or Board of Estimate and Taxation, generally, but also specifically for its staff position, more specifically on a go-forward basis. And so, as detailed in the resolution, you can see that means the clerk's office would be responsible for providing the BET and its senior advisor with support services that include budget, accounting, financial management, personnel administration, including payroll processing, information management, technology support, facilities, and just general operational matters that are in common to all of our city offices and departments. By way of a comparison to your point about independence, I would note that as part of our consolidated legislative department under the new government structure, the clerk's office also provides these exact same types of administrative and operational support services to our independent Office of City Auditor, and we also act as clerk to the Independent Audit Committee. So I think there is a very close parallel between the work that the clerk's office does and the support services we provide to another independent office, or body, I should say, that's created in the city charter. The draft resolution before you also authorizes the BET's senior advisor, when not occupied with work specific to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, to work as part of our newly established Legislative Research and Oversight Division in the Legislative Department. We had an experience of that tonight with Mr. Hawkins presenting on municipal revenue streams. This new division is tasked with informing, supporting, and facilitating legislative, policymaking, and oversight functions of council and its committees, which we believe provides a very natural synergy to the work of the BET Senior Advisor, particularly in terms of fiscal policy and financial policy review, budget analyses, and similar matters. So the LRO division has two primary units, one our policy and research unit, and the other our fiscal policy and oversight unit. That latter unit would provide an excellent home base for the BET Senior Advisor, providing them with a team of similar analysts and advisors. You said a community, a group of colleagues working on shared interests and projects that benefit the city of Minneapolis writ large, the council, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and certainly our constituents and the community at large, as I said. I'm happy to report that the Council's Committee of the Whole considered this same resolution yesterday at its meeting and unanimously approved that. It goes to the full Council for final action tomorrow at its regular meeting. And in closing, I want to express my appreciation not just to this body and especially our Vice President Priest-Stinson, but to Ms. Keiderling, as you said, who has been very patient and cooperative as we've worked over these past many months to support the development of this resolution and to enable her to continue to make contributions and support to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And so with that, if there are questions specific about the resolution I can answer, I'm happy to stand for them, but appreciate your consideration of that resolution so we can partner together more effectively in an official capacity.
Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
There's one more thing that I left out for clarity here. We're not doing this because there's not enough work for her to do, and I want to be very clear about that. This isn't some backroom, smoky backroom measure that we're trying to correct for something that we thought it was full-time and it wasn't. It is, It continues to be. It's for all the reasons that we stated, and so I don't like ambiguity and I don't like whisper campaigns, so I just want to be very clear that this move is not to adjust for the fact that this work is not now, that we now realize this work isn't full-time. It is very much so full-time. She has been performing that. We hear these updates. These bodies of work are quite large and are 100% absolutely full-time. This is for the matters that I already indicated, that the clerk has also stated in support. This is operationalizing. This is support. This is what makes sense and provides that home base. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear there, to not leave that, up in the wind, that just, you heard it from me, and I wanted to be very clear about that.
Commissioner Benny.
Thank you, President Brandt. So just a couple of clarifying things. So you said that the Committee of the Whole yesterday approved this because this would be a person from an independent body coming into the legislative branch? Is that why?
Through the chair, Commissioner Bennett, yes, I believe, and I think the attorneys concurred, that the best way of formalizing this synergy, or this relationship between the Board of Estimate and Taxation and the City Council is through joint resolutions. So the exact same resolution, same language in total, is going through the council's process for a final vote tomorrow, and the same resolution, but in the form of a BET resolution, is before you tonight.
Okay, that's helpful. One thing I wonder, and I read the resolution in the packet, and we don't have it at the dais here, but it seemed at that time I was picking up a little bit more of the administrative stuff, but I think the other piece was in there as well. But I see this as two separate things, really. There's sort of the administrative home for the BET wonderful person, but I also see then maybe just while the work cycles for the BET, there'll be times where it's way more demanding than other times, that there's now potentially just assignments that could be made. And so is the concern, two more things about that. Is there a concern then about the BET being part of the legislative work? And then the other question is, I think maybe in Vice President Priestenson's comments, you talked to the Chief Operating Officer, Margaret Anderson Kelleher. Was she aware of all aspects of this at the time?
If I may.
Yep.
So during that meeting, it was really to talk about the experience of what was the experience from onboarding, that portion of that work, but also just to talk about how the work is kind of playing out. So we had a larger discussion, and then identifying what are we actually trying to solve for, so that we're not creating a new problem to solve for. And so she was aware of the entirety. And during that meeting, the deputy was there, who also is over HR. And a couple other complementary departments, such as IT and communications, is that correct?
And finance.
Okay, and finance, so that makes sense. And then as well as our COO. So it was and then our clerk as well. So you had a good portion of our executive team that represents the entirety of that work, to understand all of the inputs and outputs and the impacts that we've had, and the potential outcomes by doing this. I would also say that this is a great example from the work that we heard about earlier. There's now continuing work, right, with this alternative tax financing. So let's just say we didn't do this. It kind of would leave Christina as an outlier, where there's nothing formal saying she's part of anything. So it allows for her to pick up work that is naturally part of this work, but she's part of that team as well. So I don't see it kind of as going back to something else that was said, when she's not working on BET things. I actually don't think that that's quite accurate. I think it's like anybody else. Like at work, I have about 20 different functions that I do, and on any given day, I might be only doing 2 of them. I might do all 20 of them, and I'm prioritizing my day based on what comes in. And so it's the same for her. It's not like, oh, I have nothing to do for BET, so I'm going to hop over here. It is a body of work. And so she's prioritizing what gets done in what order based on what's coming in and what timelines and deadlines are. So I think that's the more accurate way to depict that, rather than to say when she's not working on BET functions.
Madam Vice President, I agree with your statement. I would also clarify, for us, it was important to say that as that body of work is being considered, because Christina Keiterling is the staffer to the BET, that work is prioritized. If she is happening to work on a joint project that would involve the Legislative Research and Oversight team, and we wanted to make sure there are no conflicts between that scope of work, that anything coming from the BET through a formal work plan voted on by this body is top priority.
Hence the voting. So
Yeah.
that comment that I made about the formal voting, that's an additional reason why I stated that, specific to that point.
Okay. Just one more I thought. I'm back on the audit committee. I know, it's very exciting. And but I was on that for the last 3 years, and so I have some experience there, and I totally get that relationship. That is another entity that's just kind of out there. But they only focus on audit work. They don't have that secondary piece, I'll call it. So that's the only thing that gives me some concern. Otherwise, I do think it's a great comparable. So maybe hopefully there'll be some other discussion here about this.
I'd like to reiterate support for the idea of the clerk's office being the administrative home for the BET. I think that makes all kinds of sense. There's no reason for Ms. Keiterling to reinvent the wheel on the various administrative functions of the city. I do have a little bit of concern about maybe the looseness of the second resolving clause, to the extent that it talks about similar matters as assigned, while leaving open the question of who assigns them. And I wondered if Commissioner Priest-Stinson, how open you would be to amending that to say something on the order of similar matters as assigned, with the concurrence of the BET president in furtherance of the BET work plan. So, just so that we have that check on Ms. Keiterling's direction.
Mr. Clerk, correct me if I'm wrong, but the work plan contains the entirety of the work. We're not talking two different work plans where one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. So that's the way that I see it. I would be amenable, but I think the way that it's being read isn't the way that it's going to be applied in the way that I'm reading it. Mr. Hamer, you might want to weigh in on that as well, but also I'd be curious to see what the clerk thinks about that.
Through the chair, Vice President Priest-Stinson, I will actually ask if Mr. Hawkins would like to speak to this. Mr. Hawkins maintains a work plan, if I can use that term, which is public. It's on a dashboard. It's directed by the council when they vote on projects that go to LRO, to Legislative Research and Oversight, so that there is a public accountability and transparency, and this is the work that is being done. This is the status. Here's where it's at. Here's who brought it forward. And as we three have talked, Ms. Keiterling, Mr. Hawkins, and I think that if it were this body's inclination, it would be easy for us to model a similar type of function for the BET senior advisor, such that looking at the BET senior advisor's work plan or workload and the projects that are being undertaken and the same projects that are being done by LRO and where there is collaboration between the two would give this body the assurance of what their staff person is working on. But I don't create that work, and so if you'd like to hear from Mr. Hawkins on that, I think that would be helpful.
No, I'm more than happy to speak to that. Like President Brandt, Vice President Priest-Stinson, members of the committee, like I was hoping there was internet on this because I could just pull it up. But one of the things I can point people to, we have a public dashboard. I think it might still be under, it's under our website on the city clerk's office. It's Legislative Research and Oversight.
It's on the back of your
Yep,
report.
yeah, it's actually, if anybody has the electronic version of any of the reports, we link to it. So that should take you there. I believe we updated it to ensure that link would take people to the right spot. But the reason that we maintain that, there's not an internal-facing version. There's simply one version that's available to everybody and the public. Doesn't mean we can't do an internal version if we want to add additional detail that we maybe wouldn't want to put on a public-facing site. But what that reflects is everything that's everything that we're currently working on. We put our expected anticipated return dates. The data was requested. All of the lines in the dashboard actually link you to the legislative file. For all of that, you actually saw when I came before you today, I referenced, again, like any time that we come before any elected body, we want to make it very clear why we're there and what brought us there. We're not just here because we thought it'd be a good idea to come tell you something. We want to be able to show you, they directed us to do the following. That's why, we're now closing the loop. So I had referenced both when this came up, just in a verbal agreement in that meeting in the end of 2024 with BET, as well as the different council actions that led to the production of the municipal revenue work. We presented we did our policy briefing on social housing yesterday to the committee of the whole. Similarly, that one actually was unique. That was the first time we had an item that came out of the city budget. There wasn't actually a formalized staff direction that went through a council process, but even so, we referenced that specific part of the budget. As to the reason as to why this report had been created. So I do want to stress that with anything that we're doing, again, our goal is to operate as, it makes life a lot easier, number one, but just as, as one of the most, if not the most, it better be one of the most transparent groups in the city. I don't know many other groups. Again, I don't want to belittle the work of anybody else, so maybe I'm wrong, but that have an entire accounting of the work that they're working on that's available to any member of the public at any given time to follow along with and ask questions for. So that is something where, as far as applying it here, I would think that I'm more than happy to facilitate any build out of that for if they're the BET want to maintain their own accounting of all of the specific items that are for the individual that's assigned under the BET. I think there's an infinite number of ways that we could do this, but ensuring that we're operating as transparently as we possibly can be, and that there's a clear understanding for how work is getting to everybody. Is one of the core, I think, foundational pieces that I wanted to lift up as we were building this, since when we started building this group and audit. The other thing I'd say too is just from my own experience, even when you're not working on other things, there still is something to be said. I mean, people are willing to call it osmosis, but just from being around our collective team and the amount of stuff that we're working on, the amount of the base of knowledge that I have today versus what I had a year ago, just from being around those conversations, is infinitely bigger than it was. And so I think that there are a lot of opportunities from having, from being kind of engaged with people that are doing adjacent work and on similar items, that would ultimately end up benefiting, whether it was unrelated to work that was from the BET that they just, were talking to, the colleagues about. So I do think there's an economies of scale of knowledge to the extent that that's a thing. It's so no, I'm always going to be happy to answer whatever I can.
President Brand, if I could add one more piece to something that the Vice President mentioned, and as Mr. Hawkins was speaking, it occurred to me. Ms. Keiderling is currently a single position, all alone. Housing her with Mr. Hawkins, Director Hawkins' unit gives her a community to speak, but I think it also has a benefit to this body, and I alluded to that, but I'll be more specific. There are resources and tools, including access to research sites and services that we've given to our legislative research and oversight team that Ms. Keiderling doesn't have. She would benefit from having access to those additional resources and tools, but also there's a benefit to this body in that if she's gone, for example, on a leave or on vacation, or she happens to get that department head job at the state that was mentioned earlier, you're going to have a body of people who understand her work and who are able to fill in on a temporary basis so that this body doesn't suddenly become unstaffed, which would be the consequence of not having a community of support. So I think those are the sort of better benefits, I think, that Vice President, you were mentioning that I didn't speak to directly, but I think that those are ways that this proposal brings those synergies between Ms. Keiderling's position and Mr. Hawkins' division together.
Well, I guess I'm willing to give this a try, and we can always amend it down the road if we perceive that we're not getting the value we had hoped for in terms of getting the work plan done, and I think that the idea of a dashboard for the BET's work is appropriate and in alignment with the rest of the city, even though we're independent. So, any other comments or questions? Commissioner Benny.
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think that that department didn't exist under the previous full-time staffer from 4 years ago or whatever. Was this, and I know we had a different governmental structure then too. So many things have changed. But did that individual, and I'm sorry, I don't know his name.
Jack.
Thank you. Did he, is there a unit in the city that is maybe a little bit more appropriate than this for that work piece, not the homing, but like the finance or something like that. Okay, I think an answer is emerging from our vice president. There we go.
I wasn't going to speak to this point, but it was brought up, so I will. I alluded to it in my comments. You'll notice that I mentioned many departments and had many things. That's not to say that I don't thank finance, but haven't had the willingness to partnership, to include just having her have a desk there, to include some of the functions that did used to happen under a different iteration. So I'm not counting them out and saying that they couldn't do something later, but all I'm saying is the person who is the boss of our CFO was in that meeting, and if there was a willingness or if it made more sense or there was a different structure, that would have been an alternative proposal that we would have brought forward, but it doesn't exist, and so this is the thing.
Helpful, thank you.
All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll move, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2025-009?
I would like to, well, no, that's my motion, so maybe I shouldn't.
I'll move the motion.
Second.
Okay, a proper motion is before us. Is there any discussion or are there any amendments? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion to adopt the resolution.
Commissioner Abene,
Aye.
Chugtai,
Aye.
Vice President Priest-Stinson,
Aye.
President Brandt.
Aye.
There are 4 ayes.
All right, that matter is adopted, and I will now ask us to move on to discussion item 8.
President Brandt, before you do, I want to express my appreciation to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The comment you made was we can try this, and if it doesn't work, we can always change it. I agree. I hope that in a year or two from now, we come forward and say this was the best thing we did for the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and we really like it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that comment. And the last item for discussion is Executive Secretary pay, and I'll ask Vice President Priest-Stinson to lead this item.
It's a hot night for me here. All right, so for our last item, again, wanted to go back to pay. I want to ask Ms. Caroline, it can be strange to sit and listen to what likely is a brief discussion about pay, but if you did want to step out to not have to sit and hear us debate, you are more than welcome to do that and then enter back in. Otherwise, you are welcome to sit. All right, I will proceed. Okay, so I alluded to this earlier for the reasons that I already named. None of us actually weighed in on what level of pay she should be. There are 8 steps. Based on her resume and what she's already done, it is my personal belief that we should have brought her in at a 2. Next year is coming, so what I'd like to do is actually to suggest that she is a step 3. Moving forward into the new year. I am also open for discussion. It's something that I thought about actually on the way over. We can also discuss whether or not we think that we should take an action now to put her at step 2. And we could have further discussion on whether we think it should go back to the date of her hire. That is a discussion that we could have. So I'm open to that discussion. But I wanted to start with for fiscal year 2026, a step 3. For the reasons that I named already of why we would go from a 1 to a 3. And then turn it over to the president for discussion.
All right, is there discussion? Commissioner Chugtai.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for bringing this forward, Vice President Priest-Stinson. I would support very strongly that at the beginning of 2026 on January 1st, that we move our executive secretary up to a step 3. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions. First one is for the attorney. Mr. Hammer, do we have the ability to retroactively adjust to a step 2 for Ms. Keiderling? Is that something that...
President Brandt, I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. It may be dependent on how much money is available in the board's budget for this year. So when we're looking ahead to next year, that item is going to come before the board, usually in December. And so when the compensation is set for 2026. Obviously, that's going to be in the 2026 budget, but the 2025 budget has already been adopted, so it's just going to be, setting aside the HR questions there. I think there's also a finance question about whether there's sufficient funds in the budget this year based on the levy to do that.
I think, given the status of our budget reserve, we could adopt a motion to amend the budget if it's required. I was more concerned about whether we, under city's HR policies and whether we're bound by them or not, is a little, given our independence, I'm not sure whether we could do the retroactivity. What would this, I'm not familiar with how the city's step system is implemented. Do steps generally change on the anniversary of the hire date or at the beginning of a year, a city fiscal year?
I could actually speak to that, sir. So there's two different pay increases that city staffers usually get, from my understanding. Clerk Carl, you can please correct me if I'm wrong. There's a cost of living adjustment typically given in January, and then there is, on your anniversary date, you go up to your next step. I have been told, and I am absolutely not an unbiased source here, so I say this with a caveat that I am not unbiased. I have been told that typically for more of an entry level, you're looking at those 1 through 3 steps, and that it's negotiable for advanced experience to start higher in those steps. I could be wrong. That's just what I've heard so far.
Right. I am not. I'm not disputing that it would be appropriate to have started you at a higher step than where we started you. Just wondering about the mechanism for doing that. And just to clarify, Commissioner Priest-Stinson, are you suggesting that we go to a 2 now and a 3 on January 1st or on her anniversary date?
I would actually like to see, and there's precedence, I can speak to that if needed, but what I'd actually like to see is to go to a step 2 effective next pay period, and at a step 3 at the beginning of the year, and not waiting to the anniversary date.
Okay.
Is what I'm suggesting.
And if you could speak to the precedent, I would be grateful.
The precedent is myself.
Okay.
Let me quickly shore up what a summary is here. A summary was that my council member, my boss at the time, was misinterpreted some information that they were given. I challenged the step that I was at. I was able to move up. I was not able to go back retroactive. I don't think that it's because it's impossible to do so. We could amend the budget, et cetera, et cetera. So that wasn't in the cards, but I was able to move up to the next step at the next pay period. So I do know that that is something that can happen from my own experience back in 2018.
And that was, I was thinking more of the other part of that, doing it January 1st rather than on the anniversary date for the third step.
And I think our clerk has some additional info that he's about to share with us, but that's my motion that I would like to bring today would be twofold. I'd like to move up to a step 2 at the next pay period, happening this year, and move up to a step 3 at the beginning of fiscal year 2026, not the anniversary date of 2026 for step 3.
Okay. Is there any further discussion, or does Mr. Carl have anything to contribute?
President Brandt, just for further awareness, I think that the instance that Vice President Priest-Stinson cited, to put that in context, though, the mayoral and council member aides are politically appointed positions and are subject to different policies than would be Ms. Keiderling. So what was allowed for a council member aide would not necessarily be allowed for a different position. Those politically appointed positions are in a separate category under our HR policies, and they're not subject to civil service regulations and things like that. So that experience for you would be unique to mayoral and council aides only, and would only apply to that limited number of, say, 30 positions out of the 4,000 across the city enterprise. I think I heard what your intention was to do. I think Mr. Hammer heard that. My recommendation would be, since we aren't able tonight to give you clear confirmation of what can and can't be done, is that you direct the staff to go find out what it would take to achieve the outcomes you've asked for, so that we can come back and give you some definitive answers about we can do something we can't do, or here's a middle ground of what we can do. Because I wouldn't want you to adopt a motion that we are unable to move forward. That would be frustrating for Ms. Keiderling, first and foremost. It'd be frustrating for this board and this body to be told, you took an action, we weren't ready to answer that. So I know that puts a little bit of a damper in terms of timelines, but I think that it would be a smarter approach, and I would recommend that instead you direct us, staff, to pursue this understanding with HR and finance to the extent that monies are an issue. But I think rather than the monies, the bigger issue here is what is allowed under the city's human resource policies that do apply to Ms. Keiderling, and then the money is a secondary issue. So if that would be your motion, I think that would be something we could carry out for you.
You took the thoughts out of my head, so thank you. So I would like to do a staff directive that would actually be pointed towards HR.
I can type it.
Or the clerk, and then further clarification from legal on, specifically also for process, on what is the process, if what I'm suggesting is able to be achievable, or report back on why not, and then we have our information to make a decision at the following meeting. So a staff directive would be what my motion is that I'm bringing forward, specific to what I just stated.
And would the, excuse me, Commissioner Christensen, just to clarify, would that be going to step 2 now or going to step 2 retroactively, and then whether to do step 3 on January 1st or the anniversary date, essentially?
Correct. So it would be investigation for that directive for both, for whether we can move somebody into another step now, and additionally, can we move them into yet another step at the beginning of the year rather than wait until the anniversary date, is the directive, to find out whether those things are possible process-wise, and if so, what is the process, and then if not, we'll come back to the drawing board and we'll make whatever decision we're able to make. I will make that motion at that time.
And do we need to vote on a staff direction? All right. We have heard the staff direction. Does it need to be in writing, or since it's not a resolution?
Mr. President, I think we have what we need to formally draft it in the minutes.
Very good. You've heard the staff direction as enunciated by Commissioner Priest-Ensign. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner, no, okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The staff direction has passed, and that concludes our agenda for tonight, unless there are any announcements that I'm not aware of. Okay. With that, we will adjourn.